remembered to put it on this week. So, Revelation is what we're going to be looking at tonight. I am deliberately going slow through Revelation, particularly this part, because I think it just becomes overwhelming. This, if you kind of hit all these verses, it can just become a bit bewildering. So I am deliberately going slowly. So tonight we're just going to do one verse again, and it's Revelation chapter 4, and we're going to do verse 4, which I will read out to you. So Revelation 4 verse 4, and round about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. It feels a bit like we've got 24 seats in here tonight, but so 24 seats, 24 seats.
Not
Not
quite 24 in here.
No, it's not quite 24. It was a joke. Yeah, I won't attempt anymore. Last week I said, do you remember the 3 C's? Content, context, cross-reference helps us. Doesn't always give us exactly, the right answer, but it will probably get us closer than if we didn't use that. So the image is of 24 people, elders, sitting in a circle around the throne of God. Remember last week we talked about the throne, and how on the throne were these precious stones, and we said, well, God is not a precious stone, but the stones represent in some way certain aspects of God and of the value that we put upon God. So is this just a metaphor? The image to me is obviously not metaphorical. I don't think you would look at that or consider that image and sort of go, all right, 24 elders. Could it be like 24 trees in a circle, or maybe it's talking about 24 towers? Because seeing human beings in heaven is something that you would expect from the scriptures. That's what's going to happen to the people of God. We're going to go and we're going to be with God in heaven. So if they were 24 weird creatures, then you might say, oh, well, I wonder what they symbolise. But because we can cross-reference this and cross-reference the word elder, then there's no need to make it kind of metaphorical. It's like, okay, so there are these people in heaven. That's not unusual, and we know that through elsewhere in the Bible that an elder is a leader in the church. So just at a very basic level, if we're trying to understand what is this image about, we understand it's something to do with leadership. It's something to do with governing. So like leadership in church is called church government. So these are people. I think they're people, not angelic beings, because in the Bible elders typically are human beings. So even though it's in heaven, I think it's not unreasonable to say, well, these are people that we're looking at, or that John is looking at and is writing to us about. So an elder is a mature Christian. He is one whose faith has been tested, and he's shown himself to be faithful to the end. And I say he because 1 Timothy 3:2 says that an elder must be the husband of one wife, not the wife of one husband. So, okay, what conclusions can we come to? The elders are human, they're male, and they might be described as God's inner circle, because they are in a circle as well around the throne. So they're of some importance. these people. And again, this is biblical. We can cross-reference this this idea. So if you go to Hebrews chapter 12, this of course talking about running the Christian race. It says, wherefore, verse 1, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us. So there's this great cloud of witnesses, and generally the idea, the understanding and interpretation of that verse is that great cloud of witnesses are those Christians who have completed their races and have passed on into eternity. Again, in Isaiah 24:23, it says that God will reign before his ancients, meaning, you know, those ancient and wise people. So he will be surrounded by the most holy saints, those, in other words, those that were exceptional believers. And I don't, when I say that, I don't mean in a kind of Roman Catholic way of understanding saints, but the 24 representing those worthy of that kind of position of leadership. And I think, you know, their crowns, their white garments show that these are rewards. They've finished their race. They've been faithful to the end. And again, this again confirms that these are human beings. Revelation chapter 2, verse 10. Revelation 2 verse 10 says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. So they're wearing crowns. These are rewards for being faithful, for coming through great tribulation. So I think it's not unreasonable to assume, right, okay, so whoever they are, they have come through difficulties, but they've remained faithful, and therefore God has rewarded them by giving them these crowns, and also, of course, by covering themselves in or being covered in with white raiment, which again, Revelation 3 verse 18, the letter to the church at Laodicea, the Lord Jesus says, I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayst be rich, and white raiment. So these are rewards. These are things that God is going to give to believers, to his people, and so I think that is quite a robust argument for believing that these elders are not, you know, some kind of inanimate object being represented by people, but they are actually people in heaven. They're the people of God. So perhaps the most obvious question then is, who are they? And this, I think, and bear with me here, is the first mistake. We want to know who are the 24 people that have got this position around the throne. Matthew, who many of you remember, was an elder at our church, used to have a saying, and I quite like this. He used to say, some people like all their ducks in a row. And what he meant by that was, some people like everything to be answered and, you know, everything neatly in place when they come to study the Bible. They want answers, they want this is this and that is that. And it's not always like that in the scriptures. Sometimes we hold certain things in tension. Other times there are things that are just like mysteries that we can't really explain. And so I think we've got to just kind of, you know, go with the flow a little bit here and say, well, as I try and interpret the book of Revelation, I might not be able to tick every single box, but I might, have some degree of understanding about it. And so this is why I want to kind of share with you a teaching. It's a teaching that I heard, and maybe you heard it too. And the teaching that I heard when it comes to interpreting Revelation is that the 24 elders, 12 of them are the 12 apostles, and the other 12 are the 12 patriarchs of Israel. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that explanation before, but that's the explanation that I heard. And I think it's not without intelligence or reason. Obviously, there are reasons why that could be the case, but I don't actually think that that's true. I don't think that really works, and I'm going to explain why. So in line with the teaching that I've done so far, perhaps a better question is not who are they, but what do they represent? So remember, precious stones in verse 3 are representatives of God, but they're not God himself. The door into heaven is not a literal door with hinges and doorknobs, but it's a way of explaining the revelation of this vision of heaven. So again, I'm not saying they don't represent people here, but that maybe the representation is not limited to 24 specific people. So remember, this is a vision. It's uses imagery sort of representatively. So why can't they be 12 apostles and the 12 patriarchs of Israel? So let's have a think for a second then who the 12 apostles were. One, this is not in order that you would perhaps normally get it. So this is just fairly random. 1, Peter. 2, James, the Lord's brother. 3, John. 4, Andrew. 5, Bartholomew. 6, James the Less or James the Lesser. 7, Judas Iscariot. 8, Thaddeus. 9, Matthew. 10, Philip. 11, Simon the Zealot. And 12, Thomas. Now we know that Judas commits suicide. He's replaced by Matthias. Remember, they kind of cast lots, whatever, and it falls to Matthias. So there you go. 12 apostles, 12 elders. And we've got their names now. But are they really the most important apostles in the Bible? It's like, do they deserve those 12 seats around the throne of God? Because hang on a minute, isn't there some apostle who's conspicuous by his absence? What about the Apostle Paul? Paul, who wrote such a large part of the epistles in the New Testament. Just think about it for a second. Paul, who wrote Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Galatians, Ephesians, absolutely crucial epistles, and lived virtually, after his conversion, virtually faultless life, became the missionary to the Gentiles, took the gospel into unheard of territory. Does he not deserve a place of honour around the throne of God? He doesn't make the eldership where doubting Thomas does, and some of the other apostles, Thaddeus, kind of not saying anything against them, but compared to someone like the Apostle Paul, is that right? And if we include the Apostle Paul, then that's 13 apostles. Doesn't quite work, does it? So okay, how about the 12 patriarchs? Well, I think straight away there's a problem here, because if you remember the patriarchs, these are the sons of Jacob, right? So we've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Joseph, and Benjamin. Okay, 12 patriarchs, so the 12 elders could be the 12 patriarchs, right? But hang on a minute. Joseph, when the sons of Jacob, when they go to when they come out of Egypt, all those tribes, remember, Joseph only makes it, there's just bones. They take his bones into the promised land, right? And they say, well, Ephraim and Manasseh will be like the two half tribes, but they, both Ephraim and Manasseh, are regarded as patriarchs. So now we've got 13 patriarchs, 14 if we're going to still count Joseph. And then there's another problem as well, because are these really the most worthy to be elders in heaven? I mean, don't forget that 11 of them wanted to kill their brother Joseph, who is a type of Christ. They lied to their father Jacob, that he had been telling them that he'd been murdered. In fact, how come Jacob, whose name of course was changed to Israel, doesn't make the eldership? His sons do, you know, despite all their awful behaviour, but Jacob doesn't make it. What about Isaac or Abraham? Abraham, the father of all those who believe. But sorry, Abraham, you don't get to be one of these 24 elders. Or Moses, or Joshua, who again is a type of Jesus. So if we want a literal 24 elders, there's just some very notable people, isn't there, kind of being left out there. And also, from Shem to Jacob, there are another 12 patriarchs. Arphaxad, Salah, Heber, Peleg. They're not as well known, but they're also classed as patriarchs. And again, there are other people. There are 12 people noted in Scripture for being anointed for a special task or responsibility. Aaron and his sons, who serve as priests. Saul, David, Solomon, all serve as kings. They're all anointed, and there's 12 of them. It's like, oh no, now our ducks are definitely not in a row. You know, how do I make that fit into these 24 people? And can we really leave out David, you know, who wrote the Psalms and was definitely a type of Christ, wasn't he? And yet he doesn't make the eldership, he doesn't make the inner circle. Neither do prophets like Isaiah and Daniel and Jeremiah, who were so faithful. Who? Yes, they're just, you know, so many faithful who are not making this. If we just go with the 12 apostles and the 12 patriarchs of Israel. You know, and again, people like, you know, Judah, who comes up with the idea to sell Joseph as a slave to the Ishmaelites. You know, is he like, yeah, perfect to be an elder? But if the number of elders isn't literal but is symbolic, then that's not a problem, is it? So could it possibly be that the 24 is just a representative kind of number, that it's symbolic in some way? Because when you start to look at the book of Revelation, there are 12 gates to the city of the New Jerusalem. The city itself is 12,000 furlongs square. Is heaven really square? Is it kind of limited in that way? Just a certain size, just a certain number of entrances in? So that maybe 12, as it's used in the book of Revelation, and not just 12, but as we say, multiples of 12, doesn't have to be literal. That in fact, it's better if it isn't literal, but it is symbolic. So 12, 24, 144,000, maybe they don't have to be literal numbers. I remember there's a guy who did. He was an ex-JW, and he used to do like little leaflets against the JWs, and and exposing them basically as a cult and so on. And one of his leaflets he produced was 144,000 reasons not to join the Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, that's what I was thinking. Gosh, that would be an awful lot of reasons, wouldn't it? It'd take you a long time to do that. But anyway, yes, these numbers are very precise, and it would sound to me like they are more symbolic rather than literal. 12 is a symbolic number emphasising rule, government, order, and particularly the government of the church, hence the 12 apostles. So we read in the scriptures that God is a God of order. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints, 1 Corinthians 14:33. So who are the 24 elders? Well, I believe that they are just simply exceptional believers from every age. Those who have completed their race, those who have shown incredible faithfulness to God under very difficult circumstances and tribulations. They have won for themselves crowns of reward, hence the 24 crowns, and of course the white raiment, and therefore God's rewarded them. And no, they don't have to be literally 24 of them. And I don't doubt there'll be prophets, kings, apostles, preachers, teachers, but really only God knows who they are, and I'm fine with that. God knows who they are, but it demonstrates this reward that God will give to those who are faithful, and who will have this position in heaven. So no, it doesn't have to be 12 of this, 12 of that, or 24 of anything. It is simply, I believe, symbolic to show their role, that they are in some way leading, they're governing, and they are in God's kind of inner circle.